And we may walk away with a deal, but is it a good deal? And most people aren't doing the proper analysis and the proper planning and research to be able to determine that it's a good deal or if it's a good deal. The problem is that everyone believes in this whole concept of win-win.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Leads to Growth. I'm your host, Chris McCoy, and we are here with Mark Raffan, the negotiations ninja. There was some kung fu there, making fun, having fun. But I love the name, man, and I love the concept. Mark, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thanks for having me, Chris. I really appreciate it, man.
Awesome. Negotiations is a topic that we have not had spoke about here on Leads to Growth. And excited to be talking about that today with you. There's a lot of misconceptions out there about negotiations, a lot of misinformation, we'll say. But Mark's here to kind of set us free of some of that and discuss some of that. Mark's Negotiation Ninja, they've been featured in Forbes, Inc. The guy's a founder of Content. I'm sorry, it is Content
Callouts, content marketing agency.
Yes, content call out, marketing agencies. This guy's like, he's all around. He knows what works, he knows what makes sense, and he knows how to get a deal. Mark, what got you into negotiations, sir?
It's been my career for a very long time, Chris. I grew up in it. So my first job right out of university was in ad sales and worked in that for a while, paid off all my student loans, had a great time. And then decided to go to the other side of the table, go to the dark side and work in procurement for a long time, and built my career in procurement, ended up leading a few categories, and then thought the corporate thing is not really for me. And about 4 or 5 years ago, I decided I'm going to break out on my own. And so I started a podcast and a blog, which was Negotiations Ninja when it first started. And then here we are today. One of the most recognized negotiation training companies in the world. So it's been an exciting journey, man.
Absolutely. And it's so funny too, the idea of the question, what got you into negotiations, right? The idea, it's not like it's something that we don't do on a daily basis, either intrapersonally or interpersonally. It's something that makes up a lot of our talk and our conversation and our exchanges, and especially those of us who are in sales. So it's a very common thing that I think a lot of people maybe don't think about very often.
Yeah, I think for a lot of people, they use other words, right? They say things like, we're going to get alignment. We're going to resolve this conflict. There's other words that people use, but really what we're talking about is negotiation. It's a big part of what we do on an ongoing basis. I mean, just this morning, trying to negotiate with my kids to get out of bed was a big deal, right? Like it's a big part of our life that we don't often consider. And all of the building blocks to that, persuasion, the influence, understanding what we actually need and want, are things that people think about all the time, maybe as part of what they do, but they don't necessarily break it down to how to do it better. And that is one of the major failings that I think a lot of us have when we're developing our sales skills. We don't think of how to do what we're doing better because it's so ingrained in what we do that we get stuck in these ruts where we think that we know what we're doing, and it's delivered a few results here and there and it kind of works, so we just stick with it instead of exploring areas where we can grab additional value out of the deal.
Absolutely. And it's this idea too. Sales has such a bad concept and bad name of where sales came from, right? It's not where sales is today. It's obviously evolved, but it's still dealing with that stigma, and a lot of that comes down to two words I would think of that are the most stigmatic in that area are negotiations and closing. These two concepts are like, oh, this is the dirty part, or the part where it's selfish or ugly. But it's not, especially when you come up with an intention and an outcome, ahead of time, and you know what you're looking for, correct? And one of the things that I hear often people are looking for, and I'd love you to tell me, how do we find this ever elusive, perfect win-win situation that we're all negotiating for?
You have stepped into the area that I think is the biggest, most misleading problem that most salespeople face.
Tell me more.
salespeople, just by character and I think by culture and personality, the type of person that sales attracts is, generally speaking, a people pleaser. And we go into these negotiations trying to please our customers as best we can, trying to give our customers as much of what we can so that we can get the deal. The problem with that is that we often sacrifice the things that we need and want in order for our customers to get what they need and want. And we end up conceding significantly more than we should in a negotiation. And what ends up happening, of course, we get suboptimal deals, suboptimal value, and we may walk away with a deal, but is it a good deal? And most people aren't doing the proper analysis and the proper planning and research to be able to determine that it's a good deal or if it's a good deal. The problem is that everyone believes in this whole concept of win-win.
If you didn't see the quote Marks he put around win-win,
yeah,
they were there and they
win-win.
almost flapped right off the screen. So.
Yeah, I think it's very misleading at best and very detrimental at worst. Meaning that I think a lot of people perceive win-win to be this idyllic Valhalla state of negotiations where both parties get equal value out of the deal and it's equally distributed and everyone is super collaborative and really transparent and we show each other everything that we need and it's all kumbaya and let's hold hands and blah, blah, blah. Unfortunately, the reality of sales and the reality of negotiation is that it's not achievable because it makes a lot of assumptions. It makes an assumption that you are going to be fully transparent and also that the counterparty is going to be fully transparent. It also makes the assumption that the value can actually be divided equally between both parties. And we know that that's very rarely the case. In fact, hardly ever the case. And so I think win-win paints this picture of the idyllic state. Look, we all want to be super transparent. We all want to have quote unquote fair negotiations, whatever that means. We all want to achieve something that's, good for the counterparty and good for us. The reality is that someone's going to get more value. It may be you, it may be the counterparty, but someone is going to get more value.
I love that. And it's also, what you're saying is so true because it's all based on perceived value, right? Or
Yes.
a perceived win-win. And we all know that what perception is there's 360 degrees of that thing. And as you said, my perceived value that you're getting is based on a lot of assumptions. And if I haven't taken a thorough job to make sure that these assumptions are facts, and I haven't taken a thorough job to make sure that the value that I believe that you're receiving is also perceived value for you. I've been involved in a lot of negotiations or and listen, I almost said friendly negotiations, like I had to justify if it was friendly or not friendly or not. It's very interesting that I thought that. But I've been involved in a lot of negotiations where the value that the other person was seeking was not value which I perceived to be value within in the opportunity. And the value that I was getting was very directly related to the exchange of the product and service, but they were looking for an upstream opportunity, almost using me as a beta test in our opportunity. And so they were getting value out of it that wasn't what I would have perceived out of the initial exchange. There's a lot of variables like this. So I really like that concept. How valuable is this for two people? For one, a company to make sure that their salespeople know what a real, because how many sales teams out there have a bunch of customers that are costing the company money?
Yeah, man, it is such a pervasive thing that exists in sales, and it's a very dangerous mindset to put yourself into and to also put your sales team into, to force them to try and achieve win-win outcomes. I think is dangerous because you're now forcing them to advocate for the needs and wants and potentially emotional needs and wants of the counterparty. And that on the surface doesn't necessarily sound like a bad thing, but the problem is that now we start sacrificing the things that we need and want in order to be able to achieve that. And look, to be fair, it sounds amazing, right? It sounds great. Whenever people hear win-win, they're like, wow, okay, it sounds awesome and it sounds wonderful and we're all going to get along and it sounds quote unquote fair. But let me challenge that idea a little bit. What is fair really? Your perception of what is fair and my perception of what is fair may be two completely different things. In order for us to actually have a quote unquote fair negotiation, we have to be fully transparent with each other, because otherwise there is no full understanding of what is fair. And so now look, does that mean that people can't achieve mutually beneficial negotiations? No, that's not what I'm saying. You can absolutely achieve a mutually beneficial negotiation, but not at the cost of sacrificing more than you should.
I like what you're saying too. Be aware of the presumptions that you're making. If you're
Yes.
seeking this win-win, you are making an assumption that you are both 100% fair and honest with everything that is going and
Yes.
transparent, and both of your outcomes is an equal win-win exchange. And if you have, just be aware of those presumptions that you're making when you walk into it, and that's a very dangerous place to walk forward into.
And I think where most salespeople make the mistake and actually start off on the wrong foot is not actually fully understanding what they actually need and what they
Mm,
actually want to get
yeah.
out of this deal. So often I hear from salespeople, and this happens almost every day, where people say to me, Mark, I want a good deal, quote unquote, good deal. Well, what does that mean? How are you defining what a good deal actually is? If you tell me you want a good deal, what does that actually mean? Does it mean that there is a certain price that you're not willing to settle below?
Mm.
Does that mean that there's certain terms that you have to achieve? Does that mean that there's a warranty that you need to be able to sell with this thing? Does that also mean that you need to get certain referrals out of the deal? Like, what does a good deal actually mean for you as a salesperson? And most people don't do the work to
Mhm.
actually think through what that means so that they can get the things that they need and want.
I love this concept because the idea of all the assumptions, I think you're right. I think win-win is a place that people go to when they don't do the work ahead of time. They just make it this fantasy world which I can live in because I haven't taken the time to really figure out what those things are. I'm moving
Yes.
forward on a lot of assumptions and I'm just going to trust those things.
Yes.
I think, and the other thing is that you said it very clear. When you ask the questions, you're not moving forward with the assumptions, right? One of the
Yeah.
great questions that just came to my mind that I ask often, and I didn't really understand the full value of it. My intent was it was to direct their focus, but now I understand it's even more logical. I always ask, what does a win look like for you here? What does,
Great question.
and that question always, my intent was to direct them to focus on, us moving forward in the process, but it also brings me a very clear understanding and expectation of how they can feel like they won in this opportunity.
Yeah.
And I think that's what it is. It's a lot more about how do I get them to feel like they got a win,
Mm.
not like it's an even win-win.
I'm glad that you said feel, because emotions are such a big part of
Mhm.
negotiations, and strong proponents of the win-win ideology, and it is ideological, almost religious in a
Yeah.
lot of different areas, are that there's actually a win-win. But we know, and by the way, that whole theory is based on both parties being completely rational, which we know
Another
in
assumption.
sales is not always the case, right? In fact, very
Another big
rarely.
assumption. Yeah,
Right,
yeah,
it's a big assumption to make.
yeah.
Exactly. Now, look, I feel like I'm bashing that ideology, and so maybe let me take a step back. Are there a lot of great ideas that the theory has proposed? Absolutely, right? I mean, there's a bunch of really cool things around asking great questions and constructive and listening and constructive conversations and collaboration. Like, all of these things are great ideas. Don't get me wrong. They're wonderful ideas. I just want people to go in eyes wide open and make sure that you're actually thinking through what this actually means for your negotiation. Because if we don't think it through and we don't plan and prepare appropriately, and we don't know what we're willing to concede on and what we're not willing to concede on, we don't know where our line in the sand is, we end up falling prey to the whole idea that we're all collaborative and transparent and everything's wonderful. It's just not real.
This is such a beautiful communication lesson of asking questions, of not making assumptions, of really seeking out understanding, right? Like
Yeah,
especially in the way, in the thing that comes up here a lot in what you're saying to me is language,
yeah,
right? I just want to be happy. Okay, what does happy look like for you? What is it? Tell me
exactly,
more about what happy. Oh, I feel
exactly.
stuck in the deal that I'm in right now. What stuck? Tell me what stuck means, right? Like
Yes,
going and understanding. And I think and that on one side, that's the interpersonal, how I communicate with that person, how I interact with the words that they say, right? And
yeah,
dive into the metaphors that they use, which I think someone spoke. Returning those metaphors is a very valuable way to communicate. But the
yes,
second part is also, as you said, proactively before I enter into that conversation, is the intrapersonal use of the words that I take in, because I can just hypnotize myself with this win-win concept. I think is that's what you're saying. Listen, don't just roll in there with this idea of a win-win philosophy. Know what that means, understand what it means, understand the concept, what it means to you, what it means to them, and then go through that process to really seek. And don't assume that there is an equal value of it. I think it's all these assumptions and conversation, which is really, really a beautiful, it's a beautiful reminder for people, to take the
yeah.
time
Well
to
said.
to to take the time, because it's coming back. If you could give me a win, but if I don't feel like I earned it, if I don't feel like I got it, then it doesn't feel like a win to me sometimes. So just
Yeah.
giving me the opportunity now. A lot is opening up with this uncracking the win-win concept here. I really like this, Mark.
There's
Um,
something that you said, Chris,
good,
that I just want to dwell on just for a
please.
second. There's this whole idea of defining what you need and want. You mentioned a couple of things there, like, I just want to be happy. Like, what does that mean? And all the rest of it. Sometimes we have subjective, or what we view as subjective needs in a
Mm,
negotiation, right? One of the most common ones that I see with a lot of salespeople is like, I want to build a better relationship with my customer, right? I want to make sure that there's a better relationship. And if you're in a personal relationship with a partner right now, you know that quote unquote better relationship means a lot of different things to a lot of
mhm.
different people. And so our job is to ensure that we understand what does a better relationship mean for us, but also what does a better relationship mean for the counterparty? And do they actually want a better relationship with us? Who knows? We don't know that yet. So identifying all of those subjective things, or that we think are subjective things, and really ironing out what are the requirements to actually build that better relationship is really important.
Man, this is great, Mark. I really love this perspective of negotiations. It's very interesting. All right, so I also hear, as in negotiation is so intertwined with sales. I hear a lot of people say, "Oh, I'm not a salesperson."
Mm.
Listen, I see you sell people every day, all day. You don't have a sales role, but trust me, I watch you,
Yeah.
pitching your ideas, getting people to make improvements. I see you move around and influence people on a daily basis. And then you have the other people that are, oh, I'm in sales, but I really don't sell. I kind of just serve, or I don't sell. I don't negotiate. I could never negotiate. I don't do that. So what are some skills of a what are some great skills of a good negotiator? So if someone's out there saying, "Oh, I just couldn't do that," or "I don't know," how do we unpack negotiation into some skill sets that people can work on?
Yeah, I think the first part, and we maybe beat a bit of a dead horse here, but it's still alive, so let's just beat it one more
One
time,
more time.
is understand what you need, right? So understand what you need and want. Step one.
Understand what you need and want.
Then think very clearly and deeply about what does the other person need or want? What could they need or want? And make some assumptions, but also go vet those assumptions. Make sure you ask them, what do you want? What do you need? Because when you can identify that, then becomes a much easier to get quote unquote alignment, which is another word
Hmm.
for negotiation, with that person. Then if you're one of those people that thinks, hey, I couldn't negotiate for a living, or I'm not a salesperson, quote unquote, you do this every day, you just don't think about it. right? If you're a project manager, for example, in a large organization, your job is to herd cats. How are you doing that on an ongoing basis? You're doing that through principles of persuasion and influence, which is a big part of sales and negotiation. And I mean, look, a couple of things that people can focus on right away. Just pick up Cialdini's book on the 6 principles of influence and persuasion, and you can go through those. Number one, for example, understanding that there is such a thing as reciprocity, and he kind of covers it a little bit. I want to add in maybe a business aspect to that of don't expect reciprocity, ask for it. So if you give something
Yes.
or if you offer something, ask for something in return and make your giving conditional on getting that thing in return. Because in the business world, it's a little bit different, especially if you're dealing with a procurement person. It's a little bit different than our personal lives, right? In our personal lives, we like to believe in the idea of reciprocity. If I give, I'll get back. Yes. But in the business world, if you give a procurement person something and you don't ask for anything in return, you are not going to get anything in return.
And you will not have a
Guaranteed.
job
In
anymore.
fact, they will just take more from you. They will just ask for more. And so your job is to, yes, reciprocity is a thing, but ask for that thing in return. The second thing he talks about is scarcity, just making sure that you can manage the perception of scarcity that may or may not exist to a number of different things that you may be selling. Everyone thinks that it's the scarcity of the good. Not necessarily. It could also be the scarcity of the concession that you make. Then we talk about obviously authority, commitment and consistency, liking, and consensus. And all of these things are really, really important to ensuring that you continue to be persuasive and influential.
Yeah, big fans of Cialdini. Our PhD on staff here actually studied under him in Arizona.
Fantastic.
For her PhD, and his work on influence is exceptional. And and I think the thing that we forget, as you saw, really it's a lot about this negotiations, being proactive, being aware that you can't go in on these assumptions because we're all living biases that we don't see ourselves. We assume that we're always going to be good and something, but then we watch ourselves do some things and then we're like, what was I thinking there? Or why do I keep doing such and such when we know we shouldn't be, right? So don't assume that somebody else is going to be able to just shut down all their patterns and bias and jump into a conversation. That's really not, that's not smart for you, and it's not setting them up for a good opportunity to work with you either. So I really love bringing that back to Cialdini and the Cialdini and the influence. What are some role models for negotiation? See, a lot of the way that we build our training and development here at NASP is we go through the 6 steps of lasting change. One is creating a vision. The vision that wants to, you want to pull forward, right? What does it look like for me to be happy in that next level? What does a better salesperson or better what look like? What are the habits and patterns that I have right now that aren't supporting me? What are the habits and patterns that I'd like to replace those with, right? Some of those skills that you talked about for being a better negotiator. And then start using my imagination, right? Start seeing myself have a good negotiation, good experience, and a happy customer after I got what I want and found a way to make them have a win as well. And then choosing a role model is the 5th. And I think a good role model for negotiation is something. The 6th is actually taking the risk and start going out there and practicing these new skills. But who are some good role models that we can follow or watch or learn from out there, Mark?
I have a handful, and I'll go through maybe 3 of them, and people can pick and choose who they like
My
most.
man, you
So
got some ready for me. I like it.
yeah, absolutely. So now my most favorite is a guy by the name of Herb Cohen. He's in his late 80s now, and in the 80s and the 70s, he was known publicly as the best negotiator in the world. He, during the Carter administration, was the person who predicted the release of the Iranian hostage crisis people, and he predicted it down to the hour because he understood how people think so much. So Herb Cohen, pick up his book. You Can Negotiate Anything. It's fantastic. The other one, which may not be as obvious, but he's a brilliant example of a great negotiator, is Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela is was an incredible man. And if you just do even a little bit of research on him, you'll understand how effectively he negotiated during and after prison terms. Just an amazing role model for everyone. And then I'd be remiss if I didn't mention two more. Chris Voss is a great role model as well. Never split the difference. Sort of that FBI hostage negotiator mentality. I want to caution people a little bit on that because not every negotiation is a hostage negotiation. So don't go into each negotiation thinking you're a hostage negotiator. And then finally, I think you should be listening to and reading all of the stuff from Negotiations Ninja. Listen to our podcast because we have the best negotiators in the world coming on to talk all about negotiation.
And they can find that anywhere they get their podcasts. Obviously.
Absolutely.
My man. I love that. I love the Nelson Mandela and I love seeing the other aspects of negotiations. I've got that book, the Never Split the Difference. It's in my Audibles. It's one of my next road trip books to listen to. So looking forward to that one as well. And just subscribe to Negotiations Ninja. So I am now tuning in. And I'm going to ask you to do us a favor too. And I'm not going to have you do it right now. Maybe do it later. I know you've got some secret tips, some of that secret sauce that you do. Because I mean, you teach negotiations to everybody everywhere, right? And so if you've got a few of those tips, if you could give us one, give us a little teaser right now, and then I'm going to have you leave the other two or three in a video or something like that I'm going to put in our newsletter to kind of sneak it to people a little bit in the back door, make sure leave a little hidden gem for keeping running around, listening to you and following you. But do you got anything like that for us, Mark?
Yeah.
And some of that good stuff?
Absolutely. So here's a little tip on how to utilize emotion in negotiation to get someone to potentially change their mind. We could go through like a bunch of stuff on Aristotle, but I'm going to drive down to one specific thing, and it is the use of fear in negotiation. Most people we know, statistically, people are twice as likely to make a decision based on fear of loss rather than the opportunity to get something. So I could say to you, Chris, hey, Chris, if you do this, you'll get $100,000. Or I could say, Chris, if you don't do this, you're going to miss out on $100,000. People are going to choose option two two times more than option one. Now, does that mean you should use it all the time? No, because fear is not sustainable. But it's a great catalyst to get someone thinking in a certain direction. So that's a great way to start moving people in the direction you want them to.
I love that you just said that I got a plane rolling overhead right now in my outdoor podcast studio. So we're getting a little extra background noise, but I love that you just said that. You said fear is a great way to move them, to get them to focus or move in a direction, but it will not sustain.
Correct.
Right? You can't maintain a great client relationship always running them on fear. It's a great way to get them moving, but then you got to bring that certainty and those other aspects back into play again. That's a gem. And I know you've got a couple more that you're going to leave in a video for us. So y'all listen to the podcast, make sure that you check the video out in the newsletter, and you got to catch it there. Mark, where can everybody find you and follow you? Because your content on LinkedIn is exceptional. You are always out there putting stuff out, and of course, you come from a content background, so you've got this thing figured out. But where can people follow you and find you and all that good stuff? Other than
easiest place to find me is on LinkedIn, but also negotiations.ninja.
Negotiations, and you got .ninja.
Yeah,
you're a .ninja. That's so great. Oh, I love that. Negotiations.ninja, y'all. And definitely go on, get the podcast, check it out. Mark has got more stuff. We're going to put a couple videos and sneak them in the newsletter. And I'm actually probably going to reach out to Mark and see if he gets something in the blog for us too, because Mark, this is a really, really valuable talk. And you know what we'll do? We'll turn this podcast into a blog and we'll get it out there for our audience. And maybe we'll get some other extra stuff from you down the road. Man, thank you so much for joining us. You don't have a book out yet, do you?
No, not yet. I'm in the process of writing one right now, but let me tell you, it is a painful process. I wouldn't recommend it to anyone.
It's on my list, but it's after start doing consistent LinkedIn posts, and then there's a couple other things in there in between. So step one, I'm really focused on this month here. But man, that book, I can't wait till that comes out, buddy. I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you,
Mark. Thank you so much for joining us, man. Really appreciate it. And we're probably going to reach back out. Listen, if you're ever in Austin, I'll be there most of the time. We got a great studio and a great ranch, Music Hill. You have to come down there and visit us and record live. We'll have to hang out and have a beer together.
Let's do it.
My man. All right. Thank you so much. Y'all know what to do. Like, comment, and share. Put all the stars down there. Check Mark out. And we'll see you on the next episode of Leads to Growth, y'all. See ya.